look forward to hearing some of the stories a little bit later on in the day. Also Melbourne Cup Day today. So whether we want to have a little sweepstake or anything, we can think about that later at morning tea. But yeah, good luck to. Are there any New Zealand horses? I haven't even looked. One. Oh, okay. Well, good luck to the New Zealand horse then. Oh, okay.
We should go for the Cambridge jockey that's riding the favourite.
All right, we've got a favourite in the house. That's we'll stick with that. Thanks, Roger. Okay, good morning, everybody. Of course, we're at the Strategic Planning and Policy Committee meeting for November. First of all, I'll call for apologies. I do have one from Bill Harris, our Te Kanahi representative. There are none, so Claire's happy to move. Philip's happy to second. All in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Any disclosures of members' interests this morning? Nothing? Any late items? Nothing? Good. I'll have someone move the order of the meeting, please. Thank you, Andrew Brown and Roger Gordon. All in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Okay, moving on to the confirmation of the open minutes, 3rd of October 2023. Thank you, Monty, for chairing that meeting. Mike?
Yeah, I just want to check that I was not here in person. I thought I was. I zoomed? Yeah. Right.
Okay, everyone happy with those minutes? Are there any alterations, any changes? Lou is happy to move those minutes. And Bruce is happy to second those minutes. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we'll be moving on to our first item, which is our long-term plan work program. Morning, ladies.
Morning. I'll take this report as read, but just noting that our focus, as you'll probably be aware, is on developing the draft budget, which will be adopted on the 12th of December, so next month. So I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has got.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so it's a so take the report as read. Of course, just a nice update. We've got lots of workshop discussions this afternoon on the long-term plan, of course. Any queries for these ladies on this item? No? Everyone's happy? Excellent. Okay, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Monty. All in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. All right, well, that was short and sweet. Not unexpected. I think everything's going along very well. Thank you. We'll move on to our next item, which is our draft dangerous, affected and insanitary buildings policy for consultation. Morning, Melanie. Nice to have you here. Carl's taking a seat too. Good. All right. So, of course, this has been to us a number of times. So we're looking to go out for consultation, but I'll hand it over for you to introduce the item.
Morning, everyone. I'm Melanie Andrews. The purpose of this report is to seek approval of the dangerous, affected, and insanitary buildings policy, which is scheduled for consultation later in November. The policy is required under the Building Act to be reviewed every 5 years. It requires the policy to state council's approach to performing its functions and priorities in relation to dangerous, insanitary, and affected buildings, and how the policy will apply to heritage buildings. For a little background, a draft report was presented to SPNP. At that meeting in August, feedback was given, and we're here today to report on how that feedback has been incorporated into the draft policy. These are further clarification on the purpose of the policy, clarifying that the policy does not apply to dams as they are addressed at the regional level, providing a more detailed explanation of council's role, adding more detail on related legislation, providing more detail over council's approach to heritage buildings, providing more detail on council's procedures and powers for dealing with dangerous, affected, and insanitary buildings. One other thing to note is we will be using this consultation as a first run for our new consultation software. It's scheduled to start November 17th through December 18th. You'll notice attached to this report is the draft statement of proposal, which we are also seeking approval, as well as 2 track changes documents. Appendix 3 compares the 2017 policy with the current draft. Appendix 4 compares the changes from the draft policy presented on August 1st to the current draft so that you have both comparisons to review. With that, we're happy to take questions.
Thank you for that. Okay, questions, Claire?
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. And it looks pretty good. I've got a few minor questions about the details that are in the policies, but also, you know, that software, that consultation software, we haven't sort of been told how it will work and what I suppose the person that's putting in their feedback here is going to experience. Like, is it supposed to be a lot easier and intuitive, I guess, for how that data is collected and stuff like that?
So through you, Madam Chair, I can answer the question with relation to the consultation software. So there's essentially two parts to the rollout of this. There's the front end, which is the customer facing aspect of it. Essentially, it'll be kind of a website within our own website, or, you know, you'll go through the website to get to this platform. There'll be information on there like we would normally have on our platforms, but it's just around ensuring that all feedback goes through this portal. So even from our perspective, any submissions that come in hard copy, they'll go through the system. So then in terms of the back end, it'll be easier for us to manage. One of the things that I am really keen to do with you all is understand your preferences around how you'd like that to be presented. And I'm doing a bit of thinking around a workshop early in the new year. Once we've done a bit more testing with the system and we know what we can get out of it, and then we can have that discussion with you in terms of how you want that data presented.
Oh, yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, looking forward to that. It's really important, and yeah, there's a lot of data to be processed and collated. So the questions that I had, the first one is the definition that's on page 67 about affected buildings. And it looks like buildings that it says the policy scope at the bottom of that page applies to all buildings within the Waipa district, except those that are dams and earthquake prone. So I guess what I'm concerned about is, I'm not sure if that's exactly the right place, but it looked to me like affected buildings aren't those that are next to insanitary buildings. They might be next to dangerous or earthquake prone buildings, but not insanitary ones. Yeah. So that's the, yeah, I think it's actually up at the top there about 1.1.2 in that second paragraph at the top, nearby to a dangerous building, and sanitary's been crossed out.
We can take a look at that. I don't know if Carl's got any comments.
No, I need to have a look at that in some detail. If that word is shown as being taken out, it's been done for a deliberate reason. I'll just need to go back and see why.
Yeah, the reason I raise it, I'm aware in Christchurch, you know, the Bromley wastewater treatment plant, people that are next to it would say that, you know, it's an insanitary building, and they wouldn't have had any rights under this policy to get more action taken. And in fact, you know, there've been complaints that council didn't act promptly enough. So I was just using that as an example, and it was sort of made me wonder, yeah, whether or not, it's a tricky one, yeah, because yeah, I think that it shows that this policy wouldn't create any obligations for neighbouring people that do live next to what, yeah, I mean, you could argue a wastewater treatment plant isn't an insanitary building. I don't know, but you know, it was really smelly, and it made it impossible for people to live near it, you know, in a healthy way. So you could argue it was, yeah. I guess that's my biggest question, yeah. All my other points sort of lead to that.
Yeah. So just to clarify, you're wondering why we took out insanitary.
Yeah, yeah, and using that as an example, I know, you know, where people might want to have some enforceable rights in that respect. Yeah, sorry, I took a bit of a roundabout way to get to that point, but yeah, that's the main one.
Okay. Thank you, Claire. Roger.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think that the section in here, which is application of policy to heritage buildings, is really an interesting one, and it's giving us quite a challenge in some of our current considerations, particularly with the water tower in Cambridge. And obviously, our policy states that the relationship with Heritage New Zealand is extremely strong in terms of the retention of the building. At what stage does cost outweigh the feelings of Heritage New Zealand? There's got to be some limit somewhere.
This is the
as
age-old
to-
question, Roger.
I know it
Yeah.
is, but I think in terms of this policy, it needs to be discussed, and we need to get some idea of how far do we go. Because if we're talking, and I'm going to exaggerate here, but if it takes 20 million to bring back a heritage building to its supposed justified state, then that's a hell of an imposition on the ratepayers. And there's better things that we can do with that 20 million. Are Heritage New Zealand willing to come with the funding to bring the building back up to scratch?
We've not seen huge amounts of money from Heritage New Zealand in the
And
past.
neither will we, but they've got the control over the interpretation of the state of that particular building.
Yes. Absolutely. Look, like, as I said, Roger, this is an age-old question and certainly worth the debate. But I think when we do debate this, we're often debating on particular buildings or particular heritage sites. And it's almost a case-by-case basis as to how important it is to that relevant community. And that's how we've generally dealt with this in the past. But open to suggestions.
I've actually mentioned a particular building there. I did mention a particular building there that's currently in discussion.
That's right. Okay, anyone want to feed into any part of this? Otherwise, I don't think it's... Yeah, Lou?
Quickly, just a quick question. With the Civil Emergency Act being changed at the moment, and we're actually rewriting the Act as we're sitting in this place, submissions are out at the moment. I think they've actually closed the current time. We have within that Act a problem that while we've got a declared emergency, fine, but once the emergency has been stated as no longer on and we go into the recovery phase, we have an issue where a lot of the properties might not have been initially red stickered during that period of time, but could be affected with their sewage systems, water systems, etc., downstream a little bit. And there seems to be nothing in here and in the Civil Defence Act to actually recognise that factor. I've just travelled through the Esk Valley actually just last week and looked at the damage in there, and there is ongoing issues here that need to be looked at as well, where we have something like a massive flood, where a lot of properties are affected, and although they're not initially red stickered, they could be, or declared. Do we have the power to do this, or do it still comes under the recovery phase of civil emergency?
Through the chair, some sections were inserted into the Building Act to give emergency powers under the Building Act at times when there wasn't emergency declared. So I think the intention of those sections is to try and fill that gap. And the key for us is to make sure this policy is consistent with those.
I tend to agree to that, and I think that we all need as council, territorial authorities and civil defence to work collectively on this, so that we have that seamless carry on, move, so that we actually can cover this issue. But I just wanted to raise it because something we raised at civil defence last week, so just to cover it off.
Thank you, Lou. Okay, are there any other queries around this draft policy? I'm very happy with the changes that we've seen to the draft policy, and I look forward to our communities being able to engage on this policy as well, and particularly on the heritage parts of it, as Roger mentioned. But of course, there's much more to it than that. So are there any other changes, Monty?
Not change, just
Mm.
considering what councillor Gordon just raised. When we go through a special consultative procedure, remind me, do we get to sort of guide the line of questioning that the public are asked to comment on? Because if so, this is
Highlighting that. I think
highlighting, have we got the balance in there? Because we've set the bar pretty high that we're saying that we will seek to avoid demolition wherever possible of heritage buildings. That's quite a high bar, and there is no mention of cost benefit analysis. And so for me, it'll be quite a good one just to test with the public. Have we got that right, or should we put in a little bit more of a potential cost assessment as well?
Well, certainly as part of the consultative process, asking for feedback on that specific issue. Have we got this right? Is that something we can include,
Yeah,
Melissa?
absolutely. So we can add that into the submission form, which forms a part of the statement of proposal.
I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, I'm really keen to see that come highlighted, let's say, because and for both of for all of Waipawa, actually, this is often a very difficult decision, for our communities. All right, if there's no other feedback, page 20, we have our recommendation, A, B, C, D, and E. I think, Lou, you were going to move it, weren't you? Are you happy with that?
We go into consultation with us.
Thank you, Lou. And a seconder is Roger. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thanks, everybody. All right. Okay, we're going to move into our next item, which is our district growth quarterly report. I've seen Wayne here already. You joining? Oh, no. It's Wayne.
All right. Tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everybody, your worship and councillors. So this is the quarterly report on your page 78 in Diligent relating to the district growth of regulatory services for the first quarter of this financial year. It's for information only and there's no decisions required. I'll take parts of this report as read, particularly any national regional legislation regulations. We all know about the resource management reform, so we just have to wait and see what the new government is going to do in that respect, in terms of the Natural and Built Environment Act and Spatial Planning Act. And you've had information previously on the Indigenous biodiversity requirements and the Enabling Housing Supply and Other Matters Amendment Act, Plan Change 26. Some information there about the National Environmental Standards for Commercial Forestry. And then in section on page 80, sections there in relation to the regional strategic planning initiatives of Future Proof. And we'll traverse the Ngahuaki information that's been supplied to this committee. E-plan is up and running for our council. Moving into page 81 on plan changes. So just some information as I traverse through these plan changes. Peter Skilton's here as well to provide any detail information around this. Plan change 14, Hautapa Industrial Zone. So that's C10 growth cell. Peter's going to give a bit of an update in your December council meeting. There's a workshop where that plan change has got to, but Fonterra looking to lodge end of February for rezoning of that part of C10 north of Cambridge to industrial from rural. Plan change 17, as a number of you recall, the hearings have completed, decisions have been issued. We have Environment Court appeal by Fonterra seeking to extend the specialised dairy industrial area over parts of that land. And there are 6 interested parties of 274 notices that have been lodged, and mediation's yet to be scheduled. I think it's going to be around December 2024.
Thanks, Wayne. Do you have a question, Philip?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Wayne. Morning. The Hautapu zoning area, rezoning, is that for the waste treatment plant or?
No,
the
you're
new
talking
one-
about
the new
plan
one
change
they
14?
want to build?
plan change 14, you're mentioning?
Yeah.
Plan change 14,
In
so,
zone 10.
yes, I see 10. So this is next to the APL area, so to the east of
Oh,
the APL, the
right.
Fonterra land that we're talking
Right.
about, and the kiwi fruit block that's owned by APL as well, that we're looking at. So all of that big chunk of land in
Right,
there
in that
that
area,
forms part of our consideration in terms of our growth strategy for future industrial. So it's aligned with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, just any questions as I go through, that'll be fine. So just moving forward, yeah, as it's indicated, there will need to be a mediation process on PC 17. There's a number of 274 parties. PC 20, the Airport Northern Precinct extension plan change. Again, decisions have been issued. There's been an appeal by Royal Forest and Bird Protection Society, primarily about the protection of bats as the key issue, and 274 notices lodged by DOC and Waikato Regional Airport Limited. Court assisted mediation to be undertaken on 8 December, so we'll keep the council informed on that. Other matters to note in that page, Papakainga plan change. We're looking to bring something back to the council as an update in the December meeting about how we're progressing on that, and particularly any possible changes to the district plan as part of that plan change. Probably all I'll say in relation to the plan changes. Just moving forward in relation to resource consents and upcoming hearings, page 83 of your diligent. So in that one there, we've commented on the waste to energy plant application at 401 Racecourse Road. So been a significant number of submissions, 872 submissions, 8 support, 3 neutral. Those submission numbers will change. And the rest are in opposition. So those submission numbers will change. There's already been one that's indicated to withdraw their submission. We are seeking further information. Neither the applicant or Waikato Regional Council are seeking any call-in process for that. So we're just tracking along as an independent hearing commissioner process. And that hearing is likely to be next year. All submissions have been uploaded. So it's been a significant process. Again, those submissions on the website. Other matters to note, Environment Court appeals there. So page 84 of your agenda. So we've had mediation of NNV Jennings mediation process that's relating to the appeal on the established artificial structures and shelter belt planning for a kiwi fruit orchard. No resolution on that mediation process. There are some work that's likely to be done as a result of that mediation process, which could result in a resolution particularly between the applicant and the appellant. But if there's no resolution, then the matter is likely to be scheduled for a hearing next year. Consent summaries. So just moving on in terms of resource consents, numbers there. Page 86. So we had 122 resource consents. Interesting, that's up from 84 from the previous quarter, so by 38. And in terms of LIM numbers, again, slight increase, 247 applications compared to 237 in the previous quarter. In terms of the regulatory development of growth cells, I'll take all of that as read on page 86 of your agenda. Development contributions. Any questions? Tony's arrived, so if you've got any specific details, but just traversing some of the highlights. 79 DC notices issued in this quarter, 7.2 million in value. Recovered 2.4 million in DCs, and compared to the first quarter last year, that was only 1 million. So that's a significant increase in terms of recovery of this first quarter compared to the first quarter of last year.
Yep, so Roger and then Philip.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This DC notices issued and revenue received, etc. Do we keep any metric on the average time for recovery from capital to return on capital through DCs? Do we keep a metric on that time so we monitor the timing?
Tony can answer that a little bit more specifically. I don't think so, but if you got any comments on that?
Yeah, not an average time of how long a consent can go in for, but we have got a metric on the year in which those DCs were calculated and issued, and then the amount of recovery done in that year. So basically, when a consent gets issued, it's issued for one time because we don't do reassessments anymore. So that allows us to trigger and see what DC was paid for under that financial year. And that will be the DC policy that aligns with that consent when it was issued. So we have that metric, but we don't have a metric of the average of how long we're going to see a DC and subdivision, because that's all external factors that we can.
Is there any inference that's able to be gained from the data that you've got?
It can help with forecasting, and a lot of our development agreements have been helping in that space. A good example is the prior sale development agreements that we've been having, because we put those at a cap of 2 years. And that largely means that we'll get all that recovery that was expected in that sort of subdivision within 2 years of the signing of that agreement.
Yeah. It's become quite a relevant consideration currently as we're going into this environment of considering the LTP currently, when so much of our capital borrowing is DC related, and how much impact that's going to have on future years as it does or doesn't get repaid. So if you're able to share any information on that, even with your own interpretation, even though you haven't got the metric that actually quantitatively identifies it. But I think it would be interesting for us to get a greater understanding of that situation.
Yeah.
Thanks, Roger. Philip?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. I mean, you've talked about there's $1 million recovered last quarter and over 2.5 million in this quarter. Is it, I mean, seeing outstanding 60 million, isn't it? That's just reading that's quite concerning, isn't it? Or
It's so just a clarification. So the last year's quarter was $1 million. So it's a reference back to previous year one. The total amount outstanding, it normally sits around that 60 million outstanding, and then it's a sort of branch off recovery from there. It has gotten higher in recent years, but I think the previous quarter was sitting at around about 65. So not previous quarter, sorry, the previous last year, it's around 65. So it does sit in those sort of ranges around the higher level of recovery, which is always going to be the case, given that we issue out those notices and wait for the recovery to come in.
So normal business is what I'm hearing. So that's good. Dame Marie.
Tēnā kouroua. I just have a question. I've been asked quite a bit from the community, and I can't figure out, looking at our website and stuff, how or what is the process on selecting independent commissioners for hearings?
So as you recall, we've already gone through a process of inviting those that have qualifications in hearings processes under the Resource Management Act. And we got a significant number of applications, something in the order of around 80 from memory. And we've gone through a selection process associated with that, and we brought that report back to the council, which was around 12 or so that were selected. And that included specialties in planning, legal, iwi, ecology, those sorts of things. So it's been a transparent process that we've gone through and engaged with, and the council confirmed that independent hearing commissioner pool just recently, the other month. So does that answer your question?
No. How do we get the 3 specific ones?
So council, Waipa District, so you're talking about the waste energy plant application, right? So our selection will come from that pool. So we'll be choosing one of those representing Waipa, And I understand the other two represented Waikato Regional Council and Waikato River Authority, I think is the other one. So those are the three.
Okay, I still didn't quite hear exactly how that selection process happens within. So who or what is the process that goes pick?
So we work with the chair of the regulatory committee for the appointment of the hearing panel from Waipa. We are also considering bringing a report back to the council on the actual appointment and resolution of that person as well. So we're looking at that as a belts and braces approach, I guess, given the level of concerns that are raised by the community in that regard.
Thanks, Wayne. It's just, yeah, looking at what I could see on the internet and stuff like that in regards to the actual selection. I've been hammered out there around what is the selection? Will they be independent? It is a hot topic, so thank you for the clarification.
So yes, it is independent and well, it's the process. Okay, so just, I know we've got a little bit of time, so we'll just keep going through the report. Just rounding off the development contributions, we've highlighted there and the various figures 5, 6 and 7, where those development contributions are being paid from. So it's useful information. All right, just moving further now into the building consents. Just the other thing is the development contributions policy, as you know, is under review, and that will be going out for the formal consultation process with our developers and community as part of the LTP process next year. The building compliance side of things is on page 90 of your agenda. Just some information there. So we issued 373 building consents were issued, including amendments. Now that's down from 509 consents in the previous year's quarter, 136. So, that's interesting in terms of the downturn in development and likely to be received in terms of the reduction in revenue for this financial year as well. And there's information there on code compliance certificates and new dwelling locations on page 91 of your agenda. The value of works is also considerably down at 69.4 million compared to 164 million last year quarter. So it's a significant decrease in the value of, I guess, investment that's going on in those building consent applications.
Okay, question from Andrew Brown.
Yeah, thanks for that, Wayne. I mean, obviously, both inspections, leading to compliances and building consents are down. But it does seem there's still an awful lot of interest in private plan changes for development, etc. Can you draw any inferences from that? I mean, it's hard to know where they're going to go.
Yeah, I think it's good that there's still the interest there to actually get the planning framework sorted, i.e. get the land zone consistent with our growth strategy done, and get structure planning done, and obviously master planning. And then from there flows through subdivisions and building consents. So those are the foundation blocks for good planning, which we do here in Waipa. So I'm hopeful that when there's a increase in the market, that we'll have those structure plans, those rezoned growth areas already and able to go. So, and yes, you're correct. There does seem to be still the investment in those growth cells to do that work from private individuals or firms or companies.
Thank you, Wayne.
Okay, right. We did comment there about the review of the council's dangerous and sanitary building policy. So you just heard that. So we're undertaking those initial stages of review. We've commented in there about the police investigation, the Kodiak Engineering alleged fraud continues. We have notified all our affected parties by letter. We had around 66 building consents affected. And the team have been working in conjunction with the affected landowners and working through the process of any revised building consents that may be required to be lodged, which we'll waive the building consent fee for that. Moving into monitoring and enforcement, page 92 of your agenda, just some highlights there. 161 customer inquiries were received regarding council's bylaws and potential breaches. We had 27 littering complaints and 107 parking complaints. We've issued 20 littering infringements where we are able to find the offender, and 408 parking infringement notices were issued, so majority for overstaying and time-limited parking, so that's quite a significant number.
Thank you, Wayne. Okay, Roger.
And I apologise for this, but could I go back to the consents? In previous reports that we've had, you've had the challenge with your internal resourcing and staffing of consent applications. What's your situation now in terms of, now that we've got a reduced number of consents and applications coming through, are you managing to keep that internal, or is there still a number that are directed to external consultants?
Yeah, I guess you're referring to resource consents there. So Wendy Robinson's on board now for Tony Quickfall. So she's the manager there in the resource consents team. Yeah, not too bad in terms of the staffing in the resource consents area. If we do have a couple of vacancies, our duty planner is leaving, so we're needing to fill that position. But we're not rushing to fill key, processing positions if we haven't got the work to do. So, the first question is, do we need to fill the role? There's the work there before we look to replace those roles.
Thank you. That's very encouraging, your last remark.
Yeah.
Especially in the consideration that we've got with the LTP.
Exactly.
That's good. Thanks.
All right.
Okay, Mike.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Wayne. Hey, just a question, and it's for Brian Husney, yourself question. As the cycleway comes down, the cycleway that's been built in Cambridge, along Duke Street, there's going to be reduced parking on Duke Street and Wilson Street. And I'm just wondering, are we looking at considering, or just doing a review on the timed parking in Haley's Lane car park compared with the stay all day parking, just to make sure we've got the balance there right?
I'll need to refer that one to Brian. I'll raise it with him.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's a question in the service delivery committee. And I know they do review their time zones and what's appropriate. And particularly when, I guess, they're putting in cycleway areas, they do need to reflect on what the existing time limits are for parking in those locations. So Duke Street area for time limit parking.
Yeah, Duke, and I think Wilson as well.
Okay. So animal control now. So just moving through page 93 of the agenda. So again, quite a large number of calls, 996 calls in that quarter. Most were admin, 593, but 403 related to animal control issues, including 22 dog bites there. It was interesting now that our new contractor in place, Eco Maintenance, for emptying our dog do bins, we've actually had less complaints. So the complaint numbers have dropped dramatically. So that's encouraging. In terms of dog registration rates, I had this information just before the meeting. So at the moment, we have a record peak of number of dogs, 9,594, and unregistered dogs at the moment is 3.9%. 376 are unregistered. So again, that's improvement on what was written in the report. So we are continuing to work on getting those unregistered dogs registered. Environmental health, page 94. So the stats there, in the report. Important points to note: 511 inquiries relating to food, noise, and contaminated land licensing public health matters for this quarter. 115 alcohol license applications and 47 food premises audited, 101 noise complaints with verbal or written notices issued. And as you know, local alcohol policy is under review as well. And encouragingly, the police have done a controlled purchase operation during this quarter, and 11 premises were visited, and there was no sale to minors, so that's really good. And our inspectors work with the police on that. And other than that, the appendices are attached in the report. Information relating to the statistics there is in Appendix 5 on page 127, which is always a good snapshot of the work that we're doing in this area. Otherwise, I commend you to approve the recommendation in section 2 to receive the report.
Thank you, Wayne. Right, any other questions? Susan?
I'm happy to move that. Thank you, Wayne. But I just want to acknowledge, for the first time I got my calculator out and counted all of the queries and complaints and things, and I'm sure that the numbers are going up, and I'm not going to draw anything from that, but I just wanted to acknowledge the work that's done by that monitoring and enforcement team across the board. I mean, that's a huge amount of work under what can sometimes be pretty trying sort of circumstances. So I just wanted to, well done and keep up the good work. I'm happy to move.
Thanks, Susan. Do you have a question, Roger?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. It's very interesting reading all of the status updates on the growth cells, Brian. And there are a number here that there are changes to the existing plans or modifications or the next stages of plans that are coming through. Can you tell me if there are changes or if plans are now coming through, do the density requirements that are included in Future Proof as the regional plan, are they applicable? Are they brought into consideration in these revised concept plans or subdivision plans? We had this discussion about the relevance of the Future Proof document, and we were given
detailed question. I'll have you got a response on that one?
Only from an engineering perspective.
No, it's really it's really on our district plan interpretation and the regional policy statement of Future Proof, because that's stating that any new greenfield development must reflect the higher density 25 to 30. So we really need to know if that is influencing these new structure plans and the further developments of C1, C2, C3, etc.
I'll need to confirm. I couldn't say to you exactly, yes, that's happening. I would have thought that, yes, we have regard to that in terms of the density requirements that are being planned for those growth cells. And I do know that for growth cells like C5, for example, which is on the outskirts of Leamington, there is provision for higher density developments to occur to ensure that we are meeting those density requirements. But I'll just need to be 100% confident that, yes, we're meeting that requirement.
Yeah, and I think part of my concern or question is the fact that those original concept plans had a higher density overlay, but it was quite minimal in terms of the percentage of the geographic area of that concept plan, and it really had very minimal impact on the overall density. So it was still 15-ish, 20-ish for the whole of the concept plan development. But now, with those higher requirements, are they being applied to the whole of the average density of these newer greenfields, which should be 25 to 30? And I think we need to know what kind of change.
I'll get that confirmed for you, Roger.
Plan change 26 and that as well.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, and we do know that there are some developers that actually want even higher density requirements that they're looking at within Growth Hill, such as in C1. So it's not just a matter of meeting that. Some people actually want to exceed it for particular areas. PC 26, do you want to comment on that?
So just a reminder on our response to the MDRS standards from Plan Change 26 perspective, which is still in train with those commissioner decisions and recommendations coming out. But what we've seen in the engineering space is that they've modelled the water supply and wastewater and traffic modelling as it comes through at those density ranges that were going to be part of that PC 26 recommendations. So we have seen the consultants look at that sort of density range, but try and comply with what our attempt at PC 26 was. So regardless of the decision being made, and PC 26 was never to get to that 25, it was to get sort of the 2 lots as opposed to the 3 lots. So that gets you at a density range at around about 17 to 20. And that's sort of what's coming through the door. And that's our recommendation for the commissioners. And that provides for sort of a smaller average lot size, but also the ability to go denser in specific areas where you get that mixed typology. So smaller house lots, but also super lots in those areas where you can have the higher density in a constrained environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens to affordability as well in these new areas, which is obviously one of our concerns. Yeah, my concern, sorry.
Good question. Claire, question?
Yes, thanks, Wayne. I was just following up on that query I had about the Te Tahu quarry. About 10 days ago now, someone was asking about the noise and things like that, because it seems to be really active. And have you had any feedback or anything? I just thought I'd take advantage of the fact that Carl's here as well.
Through the chair, yes, I'm going back to review what we did back when those previous complaints were made. I think the issue there is potentially more of a need for an explanation about what that rule is and what those levels mean. Certainly the person that did the review of the noise back then would be our in-house acoustic expert. So I'd be relatively comfortable with the conclusion they drew last time, but just, going back through that process to see if there's anything else we can do.
All right, okay. If there are no other questions, excellent report. Thank you very much. It's just that obviously this is a space we're all having to be, questioning, and also, have a really good high level of understanding at the moment as a district continues to grow. We get more dogs and all those sorts of things. So, excellent report. So, Susan, you have moved the recommendation. Dale Marie is happy to second. So, all in favour? Carried. Thanks, everybody. All right, okay, we shall move on to our next item. Paul Strange is in the house. I've seen him. Our Structure Asset Management Services. Morning, Paul.
Through the chair, I'd like to table this report. Our Structural Asset Management Services contract looks after our bridges, so it provides us with engineering expertise. Becca have the contract. It was awarded 18 months ago, roughly. And we have our normal inspections. We also included the Victoria Bridge repainting management. And we have spent a bit more money managing that contract than we originally anticipated, mostly through additional calculations and checking and things like that to enable us to keep the traffic live on the bridge.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, any questions on this item? Philip.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Paul. Morning. So when you say the costs have increased, is this to do with the project or the management of it? Because we went there on a site visit in, I think it was September, and they said they were well ahead on schedule. There was about another week to go, and they would have got across the road, right across the other side, and the scaffolding was coming down in November. It seemed like the job was well in hand. So when you say it's scope and time and things like that,
Okay, we haven't spent any more money putting paint on the bridge, but we have spent a lot more money calculating how much scaffold we can put and where and for how long and the phasing of that scaffold. So there's a lot more thinking. So the contractor incurred more costs and our consultants have incurred more costs. We've also pushed the envelope from design standards because the design standards are very conservative. So we've put strain gauges on the bridge so we know exactly how much strain we're putting on the bridge rather than using a calculated figure. So that cost us 19,000 to put those strain gauges on. We've put wind monitoring so we know exactly how much wind is hitting the bridge, things like that.
So
Thank you. Oh, do you have a subsequent question?
yeah, so with regards to wind monitoring, wasn't that all in the original budget? And because that was all, I mean, it's been outstanding that I don't think the bridge has ever been closed, is it, during this process? And that was one of our biggest concerns a couple of years ago when this whole project came up about the bridge closing and traffic management and congestion, do we get buses in and all that sort of stuff. You know, you've done an outstanding job, the whole group of you, so that's great, but wouldn't that have been part of the, you know, wind monitoring and things like that? Wasn't that all part of the process anyway?
Yeah, so there's basic wind monitoring included in the contract, but when we started pushing the boundaries, we started looking at wind direction because the wind down the river affects the scaffold more than a wind across the river. And the design standards have us designing for 42 meters per second wind, which I think from memory was 150 k's an hour. And we dropped that to 125 k's an hour. But we had to have a plan to remove the wrapping if the wind was going to get up. We had to have an action plan in place so that we weren't sending guys up there when it was already 100 k's an hour wind. So we had to plan everything before we needed it, and we haven't needed it.
Thank you, Paul. Very good detailed answer. Susan and then Andrew.
Yeah, look, you sort of largely covered it there, but I just wanted to acknowledge it would have been pretty unreasonable of us to have expected to have not paid more, given the very clear message we sent that it was Cambridge residents' desire to minimise the disruption in terms of usage over that bridge. So I'm really comfortable, as Councillor Coles has suggested, been a great job. You guys have done really, really well, good timeframes and all that. So I'm quite comfortable with the extension there.
Thanks, Susan. Andrew and then Roger.
Yeah, so this is different, not the bridge per se. I'm interested in the bridge inspections, which I take it as bridges and other structures. How often are they inspected and how many do we have, do you know?
We have about 150 bridges, as you'd recognise them as bridges. We have 258 large structures, so that includes some big culverts. They are inspected every 2 years, and every 6 years we do what's called so they get a general inspection every 2 years, which is by a structural engineer or a team of 3 of them. And then every 6 years they do what we're trying to do, principal inspections, which means that someone gets within 2 meters of every element of the structure. So sometimes the access is quite complicated, and we're trying to get that done every 6 years on every structure.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
That covers 3 years.
Okay, thank you. Roger.
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just a confirmation, and I can quite clearly read it, but I just want to make sure that it's recorded that although the additional amount requested is 270,000, 50% of that has already been agreed to be contributed by Waka Kotahi.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, is everyone happy with the with the report? Okay, we've got the recommendation on page 131, A, B and C. Susan's happy to move. Dale Marie's happy to second. All in favour? Carried. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, we've got a resolution now to exclude the public, so we'll just take a breath and we'll take a look at our minutes from last time. Yeah. So Claire's happy to move into public excluded. Philip's happy to second.